Okay, today's webinar is Bringing Your Enterprise Structured Writing System into 2017 and Beyond, and our presenter is Doug Gorman. Doug, it's all yours.
Thanks a lot, Deborah, and thanks to everyone for coming. I have a definite point of view about structured writing and structured markup and technology, and here's how I got here. Back in the 80s, I worked for a database management system company, and at that point, the whole goal was to get numbers and records into some kind of a shared database to improve productivity. And the light bulb sort of went on there that maybe there was an opportunity to move beyond numbers and names and records and reuse other kinds of content. In the mid-'80s, I met Robert Horn, who had developed a structured writing methodology known as information mapping. So I worked for information mapping from 1986 to 2009, commercializing his research into human performance and how communication and information can be improved to help human performance. Over that period, we trained hundreds of thousands of people and brought the methodology to 43 countries. So how about technology? Well, in the 90s, there were simple little macro tools that could do format. Lucent, AT&T was our biggest customer, and they spun off Lucent, and Lucent wanted to reuse what we called information maps and chunks of information. And we used a markup technology called SGML, Standard Generalized Markup Language, for publishing documentation around their switches, and it let them reuse chunks of information. The result was that they could cut the time from order to delivery in half. So that sort of got me the real structured markup and structured writing disease. In 2001, we began experimenting with structured markup with XML. In 2009, information mapping was purchased by some Europeans, and simply XML was spun off. And I'm still intent on the possibilities of structured writing, structured markup, and technology. I'm intent on this beyond technical publications. I believe enterprises at large need to marry this technology of structured markup with structured writing. Earlier this year, one of our implementation partners, a company called Vega, said, you know, Doug, customers don't want XML, and they don't want data, and they don't want markup. They want consistent, reusable content. And this caused me to assess where structured writing is today at the end of 2017 versus times past. So it's simply XML's goal and my goal to help bring you on this journey. And this is a summary of my point of view. I'm going to present a summary of structured writing methodology that meets the needs of non-technical authors who are implementing DITA or some other XML standard. There is a huge opportunity to adopt modern content authoring, repository, publishing processes outside of tech pubs, and it requires a simple approach to structuring content for the reader combined with an XML markup. But that XML has to be hidden in the background. So with a focus on topic-based writing, I'm going to present where I think content management and structured writing has come and where it is going at the enterprise level. So the context here is rapid change. You know, we used to talk about how you had to write with the reader in mind. And that's still true. Whenever someone creates content, they have to think about who's going to use it. But more and more now, the content is also being consumed by machines, by bots, and by search engines. So you need to think about that and structure your content in a way that a machine on the front end can get just enough, just in time, just the right information for a human to then read it and perform. Technology advancements have been significant in terms of content management systems, enforced workflows, publishing, that sort of thing. So it used to be 10 years ago that we'd say, oh, we've got to publish our content to multiple media. And the organization decided whether it was going to publish in PDF or on the web. Well, at this point in time, the technology is pretty ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And it's really a consumer's choice of how he or she wants to get the important information he or she needs. One day I might want to print a page out of a PDF, and the next day I might want to see something on an iPhone or on the web. And it's now the consumer's choice. And all of this has taken place in a time when human attention spans are limited and always in demand for something else. So all of this has to be implemented in an environment where there are still limited resources but maximum expectations. So here's the human performance problem. How do I do it? What steps do I take to do it correctly and efficiently? When do I need to do it? How does this thing work? What do I need to know to be able to do a procedure? What does this thing look like? Where can I find more information? These are the questions that an information consumer has in his or her head as they come to find content to help them perform. Now, machines have a whole different performance problem. What content is relevant? How's the machine going to find exactly the right content? How can it reuse content that's the same and publish it to multiple media? How can I publish to PDF, mobile, HTML, EPUB from one single source so I don't have to keep up 5 different versions of the same content? How can we improve translation, quantity, and efficiency of that process? More and more information is being demanded in translated form by your customers and users. And finally, how can we support modern content management system processes across the enterprise? So I'm going to talk, I've talked about structured writing and structured markup. I think these terms get often confused. Structured writing is a term coined by Robert Horn, and it's a means of analyzing, organizing, and presenting information so that human beings can actually do something. And it's oriented towards reader performance. It introduces the idea of information typing and authoring principles of how to tie content together. Structured markup really is a way of tagging words and phrases and content for meaning. And it's really oriented towards machines. It's metadata, and it's structured so that a machine can look at that content and decide what to do with it, either how to present it or whether it's relevant to either a writer or a reader's needs. So it provides a rich layer of metadata underneath for capturing information about the information itself. So back to the information consumers, all they want is information that's accurate, that's actionable. Can I actually do something as a result of looking at this information? They want just enough information, just in time, on the media of their choice, and increasingly in their language of choice. So all of this says to get consistency, to allow this to happen, we need standards. And standards improve the consistency of content, professionalism by making the brand more consistent, by getting your reader to take a common look at content in a certain format and automatically know what to do with it and that it's from your company. So it improves the brand. Standards improve accessibility and reusability and efficiency. And my point of view is that you need standards to get the benefits of the rising content architecture of XML. So big picture, structured writing and structured markup are inextricably linked. You need both. You also need topic-based authoring to create enterprise content that gets the right information to the information consumer, allows reuse, multi-channel publishing, this idea of single source publishing from one source to many media. You need it for consistency, for control, and efficiency. And you need it to create, manage, and publish content that conforms to an XML standard, including DITA, but also other XML standards, DocBook, S1000D, etc. So to apply this material, enterprise content management involves structured writing, structured markup. There are many places in the enterprise that can benefit from both the structured writing and structured markup with technology. Marketing people can use technical material from the technical areas. Salespeople can use marketing material. The compliance people can use policies and procedures that might have been created in another part of the organization. Training people can use technical documentation to some extent as well. So there's a lot of places in organizations that can benefit from using and reusing content that was created in another place in the organization. In order to make this happen, you need high-level, cross-functional, both technical and business leadership. Going back to the information consumer, he or she is always first in mind. If he doesn't get the information he or she needs, you've lost the war. Now, the technical areas have had plenty of technology, and it's expensive technology, and it would be very expensive to use those same tools across a whole organization, and it's unnecessary. So our view is that you should always use an appropriate level of technology within the comfort zone of anyone who authors or anyone who's publishing. So an XML architecture can let you mark up that content, and it can move across the whole organization if it's implemented in a reasonable way with simplicity and ease of use in mind. So I talked about topic-based writing, and I believe topic-based writing is essential to this whole effort. And here is how I view the importance of the components of topic-based writing. So a topic, first of all, is a base unit of content. It's a piece of information that can stand on its own. It might answer a single question and can be authored as a unit. So we think in terms of topics as the base unit. Then there are information types that are really based on what the information consumer needs. So there are procedures, how to do something, principles, which are rules, processes that describe how things change or transform, concepts, which are about information or knowledge topics, structures, which are pictures or graphics or images that show what something looks like, and finally reference information. And going back to the human performance problems, I want to know how to do it. I'm looking for a procedure. I want to know, when do I need to do it? I'm looking for a principle. I want to know how this thing works. I'm looking for a process. I need to know what I need to know to be able to do it, and that's a concept. What does it look like is a structure, and where can I find more information? That's a reference. Facts are references as well. So this is how the problem of the questions that a human asks, an information consumer asks, and the information types that drive that person being able to perform. Then there are some principles of great content development that should always be kept in mind. The first is orientation. You orient yourself towards the reader. What does somebody need to do, and what do they need to know to do it? But the orientation is also towards the bot or the search engine that's going to be looking through the content, and I'll talk in a few minutes about metadata and ways to support that. Well, a topic is a base unit, but it's not always sufficient as a single topic. So we put topics together into larger groupings, chapters, publications, etc. But the modularity aspect of content works at many levels throughout a larger set of content. Consistency is important. Consistent terms, use consistent formats, get your writer used to presenting content in a consistent way so that the reader immediately looks at it and understands how to use it. Ultimately, large pieces of information or groups of information are organized in a hierarchy that has to be accessible at many levels. It can be accessible through a search. It can be accessible through a table of contents. It can be accessible through a link. And it's important as a writer and as an organization to think about the many different ways that readers are going to access the information to perform, but also your writers are going to access the information to see what's already available for reuse. And then there's the issue of media. More and more we're seeing video procedures, and there are certain kinds of content that work better in written form, in words, others in tables, others in graphics, and others in potentially video. So these great principles of content development are things that every writer should keep in mind in developing content. And when these are applied by a large group of people across a large organization, the result is both clear communication and consistency. So XML is basically a tagging structure, and it's a way of providing information to a computer about what the content is itself. So, some examples are here's a topic, and XXX is actually the content. Here's a title. Here's who the author was. So XML is actually an ugly thing to look at, but it's extremely useful for the computer to be able to find the information so that a reader can read it or an author can reuse it. So XML standards are sets of rules. They're shared across people. They're shared across departments and organizations. Data is extremely complicated. It has 600 available elements. Our point of view is people don't need it. We've implemented a subset of that data tag set that we call simply data. And then we have another structure called simply structured, which will be familiar to people with who are trained in information mapping, who might use FS Pro or a product called DocuTools for capturing their structured writing. People think of HTML, a PDF, they're really formats, and they don't really include a lot of information about the information so that the content can be managed modularly. They're really about format outputs. So XML standards are important, and we'll talk a little more about it. Metadata is information about your information. So it's information about your content. And it's used for authors, but it's also used for publishers. So at one level, we talk about metadata as properties that describe a topic. Or even a data map can have properties. And then attributes are metadata describing another level of detail in the content. So you can add attributes around a section of content or around a table or a list or an image, that sort of thing. And these are hidden from from the reader, but they're used in searching and trying to get to exactly the right information that an author would need for reuse or a reader or information consumer would need to perform. So metadata is another piece of topic-based writing for the modern age today. So then we talked a little bit about larger documents, this idea that you're going to take these different kinds of topics and you're going to string them together into a larger document. And the larger document might be called a data map. It might be called, we call it a simply structured book. And the hierarchy can keep going. So as an example, our documentation for our product content mapper is in DITA, and it consists of a DITA map that includes lots of different DITA maps. So we manage all the content for our product in a hierarchical structure of DITA maps. There are lots of opportunities to improve consistency, and reuse can help do that. So it's not just reusing the content itself. You can provide somebody a template for a business plan or a compliance document where the structure is laid out, where the hierarchy is laid out, where the labeling is laid out ahead of time, and authoring becomes a process of filling in content in the template. You can think of a product sheet as potentially having a template to support the same kinds of content but with different products. Topics can be reused, sections can be reused. A lot of times you're going to want to set up one or more standard tables that people can fill in for a sales list or even for a procedure table. Step 1, do this, here's the result. Fragments are reusable chunks of information, generally sections. Could be something like a copyright notice. And images can be reused as well. And then at the next level up, you can reuse maps and other component content using content references. So it's important to think about this idea of consistency leading to the ability to reuse content. Now, a caution here is that often we'll show people the concept of reuse and say, oh, this is great, I can reuse everything. Well, technically you can, but somebody needs to manage the administration of that reuse and understand where in your content management repository the reusable information is and what content it's reused in. So that if you want to change it, it easily changes, but it changes across all the places where it is reused through a link. Of course, this wouldn't apply if reuse is being done as a copy. You can take a copy of some piece of content and then edit it. But a lot of reuse is what we call component references, where there's one set of content that everybody uses exactly as is. That's reuse. And then publishing. A key thing here is that content creation is separated from content publishing. And there's lots of different options once you have single source. So we actually have a wizard that moves the XML content back out to Microsoft Word and publishes to PDF or XPS or back to DocX. And then in DITA there's a huge open source set of tools called the DITA Open Toolkit. Once you have a single, it's very easy to publish to PDF or HTML or EPUB or mobile or whatever. All right, so how does the process improve? So these are the, I've reviewed the 8 aspects of topic-based authoring. So first of all, you're separating content creation from content publishing. It's estimated that people using desktop publishing spend 30% plus or minus of their time formatting their content so it looks good. The problem with that is what looks good to me and you and the next person may be something different. So in order to get that consistency from the reader's standpoint, the information consumer standpoint, you separate the content creation from the publishing, and everybody won't have to spend their 30% of time making it look good. By putting content in topics and into a shared repository, people can open a topic, they can edit the topic, they can close it and save it. It's done through something called check-in and check-out. So I can work on a piece of content, and if you tried to work on it, you'd get a message saying, hey, this has been checked out to Doug. Do you want a copy, or do you want to wait till you can operate on the specific content itself? There's the idea of workflow. Organizations for years have manually done workflows. They've created a document, put it in DocX, done word review, and then somebody collates everybody's word review. This can all be managed now by a repository. So workflow can control the creation of content, the editing of content, the review of content, and finally the approval and ultimately the publishing and release of that content. A shared repository, a content management system, even SharePoint does a great job of managing versioning. So you get the most current pieces of content, but it's all in a chain and can be rolled backward if necessary. You get content reuse, more and more translation of marketing materials, of training materials is going to be demanded by your information consumers. And there's a general rule of thumb that says that if you're translating into 3 or more languages, having this kind of XML architecture underneath pays for the whole effort here. And then the idea of single source publishing to multiple media. So these are all the process improvements that are available to an organization with the combination of structured writing and structured markup with modern technology. So where do we see people running into trouble? So I'm going to give a negative view on this, and then I'm going to give the positive view. So we see technical organizations that have had great success with DITA at great expense, and they set the goal as we're going to implement DITA. What we're implementing is consistency and reuse and better content, and DITA and XML are just something that are underneath. We're going to implement the full DITA tag set. Nobody can understand what 600 elements are going to do for your content. You have to create your content with a subset of XML. You think of XML and DITA as really a language, and what you're going to do is make the communication simple with a subset of that language. Don't make them learn DITA. If they're outside of a technical area, they don't need to know the nuances of even 100 DITA structures. Now, a lot of the tech pubs organizations have adopted technical editors, which are great. They're really high-tech programming instruments that let people create XML. But the organization at large uses Microsoft Word. So you need to let the enterprise authors stay in their comfort zone, and there's a way, a very positive way, to lock down the Microsoft Word user interface and create great XML in the background. The other mistake we see is people leading with IT technical resources or consultants rather than business people. And I'm talking about moving this reuse and single source publishing beyond the technical areas. A big mistake, of course, to ignore information consumer needs, because they need the right information at the right time in the right way. We often hear technical people say that DITA is structured writing. It's really not. It's structured markup. And structured writing is something that you do for your information consumer. So there needs to be respect for both, actually, technical jobs, functions, and the non-technical, the marketing people, the compliance people, the policy and procedure people. So on the positive side, you need to take a well-defined systemic approach to this effort. You need to understand who's going to use the information. You need to understand these information consumers and focus on them. You need to keep it simple, smart person. You can't go overboard by, wouldn't this be neat? And boy, we can do this, and look what we can do now. If you start there, you're in trouble because you go down a very complicated rat hole and you get out of control very quickly. So you have to keep this reuse effort and the writing effort as simple as possible. There's going to be change, but make at least change. Don't tell every single enterprise author that they have to change their writing instrument. It will go nowhere. You need standards on your content, and the standards apply to the markup as well. Best way to start, a department at a time, pilot, and then go live in phases. And you need some high-level leadership to bring this across the organization. So staff and management underneath the C-level need to own it. Ideally, there's a technical CTO involved and some sort of a vice president or a C-level person who has a business function that you're trying to improve the content creation and management. So these are the principles that we have seen used to create success beyond the TechPubs area, or even in the TechPubs area, with structured writing and structured markup. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Doug. That was a great webinar.